Hi and welcome. If you're new to my channel, there's a couple of introductory videos in here you can just go search for. I'm doing what is called a live stream. There should be a chat box on the side. You can chat amongst yourselves. I put an outline below in the description box of what I'm going to talk about today. And basically, I'm going to start working on methods of research and theories and ways of knowing. It is somewhat at the PhD level, but some of these things are kind of basic and you might learn them as undergraduates or even as advanced studies, high school students. So, how do you know what you know? Well, first of all, I put in there that people learn, through formal systems of education, reading and research, but there's other ways of knowing. But if you're going to be a scholar practitioner and you want to be taken seriously as an authority on what you know, you're going to you need to understand the philosophical foundation of the commonly accepted belief systems or the methodologies, research methods, and that sort of thing. So I'm just laying down the foundations here. But if you talk to different people about how they know what they know, I just realized I'm kind of overtired. I've been up since 5:30 this morning. I forgot to acknowledge my viewers a little bit more formally, and I do apologize. I want to say thank you to all these viewers that have been commenting and everything. I love to hear what you um, have to say. So, this is sort of a sociology, psychology, scientific method of understanding how we know what we know. There are layperson methods of understanding what the truth is, right? You can go to religions and accept the scriptures as knowledge, and it's not necessarily scientific, but they talk about faith, and faith is believing without proof. Well, the scientists ask to have proof of what they believe in, as does the courts. Justice courts ask for evidence or proof. So, as students, you will want to know how you know what you know. What's the logic between what you're being taught? How are you going to spot biases, misinformation, propaganda, and that sort of thing, right? Well, if you're going to write a paper and you want to be accepted in that paper, in your research methods, you're going to need to understand these philosophical foundations of ontology and epistemology. And so I'm going to throw some terms out here that you need to know. And but first, before I do that, I'm going to actually, I got to grab my outline here so that I don't jump all over the place. I did put the outline below. I just need to pull it out for my own reference. Okay, so I started out with, I didn't put, introduction in here or anything, but okay, so laypersons. Okay, so who are laypersons? People that are laypersons are people that have not studied a particular subject and area. They're not experts. But some of what they think and do is it's just regular people that have no particular research. They don't have a formal understanding of research and whatnot. They could just be kind of, intuitive, artistic, which, sometimes intuitive things are right. They're spot on. But the problem is that with the scientific method, you're going to prove it. But the thing is, a layperson is not going to use the scientific methods of explaining how you know, the nature of reality, the philosophical foundations, and whatnot. So a layperson will learn through their culture. They'll learn through tradition. Why do we follow halal? Why do we not eat pork? Why do we eat pork? Why is one way better than the other? Why do we not eat meat at all? Who's right? Who's wrong? Well, from a lay person, you can sit down and say, well, this is our tradition. This is our cultural value. This is what we do. This is how we settle disputes. This is how we prove we're right. Might equals right. And then others are like, no, peace equals being right. What is the truth? So a layperson seeks the truth through tradition, characteristics of sort of intuitively, osmotically, and it's not necessarily going to be right. It's a perspective. So you've got these different mindsets. Now, religions will tell you to believe and conceive and to have faith a lot of times, but the religion could be right or wrong. A religion that tells you to seek the still small voice within and use your own discernment is probably a correct religion. A religion that tells you to have blind faith, that might be a unrealistic type of following or religious way of thinking. So you've got these different mindsets. You have, mythology, and you have these narratives, that you're indoctrinated to believe in right, wrong, truth. This is the truth. God, says, Jesus says, I'm the truth, the way, and the light. Taoism says, no, this is the way, the truth, and the light. Buddhism says, no, this is the way, the truth, and the light. So, and this is how things were created, So these are sort of intuitive. The Egyptians over in Africa, in northern Africa, had an ancient civilization that had foundations that really weren't, they were based on some cultural beliefs and ideas that were passed down through the generations. And things were passed through storytelling. And certain things were accepted, like don't go outside in the rain because you'll get sick immediately, following within a week. And, different things like that. Is that true or is it not? Are we going to run a test? So this would be kind of like step on a crack, break your mother's back. So these are truths or not truths. I don't know. If you step on a crack, are you going to break your mother's back? When I was a young child, I used to jump around the cracks, make sure I didn't get on them. Later on, when my mother was older, she got mugged and her back actually did get broken. But, I was sitting there, my mother's back is going to get broken if I step on one of these cracks. So I'm jumping around. Now that's a lay person. That's a child's way of thinking. You know, 6 years old, not quite there in the logic department. So you know, but it was a belief system I had, and it was a lay person belief. It was based on cultural sayings that could be true or not. Good manners, you know, are you know, a lot of the teachings of religions are good. They have good principles in them, but there's cultural ways of knowing that aren't necessarily true. They're layperson. And so there's different approaches to knowing, right? Well, if you're going to be a scholar and a practitioner, you're going to have to follow different paradigms. And you might even have to unlearn some of what you learned and not have blind faith, but you have to test things. So the problem with this is it can lead, if you look at things and you don't look at studies practically, you could wind up believing what's called pseudoscience. Okay? Now this isn't a term you probably want to know. So it's a method of discerning true scholarly work and something that was paid off by a think tank or propaganda with biased and skewed information, different ways of spotting this and understanding the methods of research. So as part of science, science always seeks to find the truth. Pseudoscience does not. It is not scholarly. It is not accepted. So you need to distinguish between scientific and non-scientific work when you become a scholar. And you have to develop a way of knowing. You need to know the elements of research. And today I'm going to talk about the basic philosophical two foundational scientific methods that the ancients termed the sophists in philosophy, and the logic of how you're going to frame your research. So let's take a look at, I'm going to kind of skip ahead now. I put my talking points below as, you know, pseudoscience, advertising, propaganda. I put down it could include overgeneralizations. I could break this down and we could go over all of it, or I could jump right over to the Epistemology Ontology. You can speed this video up. You can slow it down. In one of my introductory videos, I show you how to do that on a laptop or a PC. But I didn't have graphics for how to do that on a mobile device like an iPad, which I've noticed different setup on YouTube depending on your device. And I guess it's optimized for multiple devices, and it changes where the boxes are. And the wheel, they don't even have like a wheel for changing the settings. But anyway, on that, so with the laypersons, if you follow the logic of laypersons, this is very prone to fail. And it's I'm going to jump backwards actually, because I just looked over at my notes and I realized that I headed the title of what I'm getting to. But before I get to what I'm getting to, I want you to be able to discern propaganda, illogical reasoning, inaccurate observations, bias, selective observations, overgeneralizations, and basically heuristics. And a lot of people do rely on heuristics. I didn't put that in my notes, but if you take sociology or anything like that, you're going to learn about that. And it's basically a way of a just shortcut. And that's basically what laypersons use quite frequently, and most people do, is they use heuristics. How was I raised? What's the tradition tell me? What does the culture tell me? Does my culture tell me that for centuries we've been abusing women, therefore we should abuse women, and men are better than women? Is that what my culture tells me? We're patriarchal. The woman has to listen to the man. She's below the man. You know, these kind of heuristics, they're even written into scriptures. And these are supposedly uh, logical ways of taking shortcuts and how you're supposed to behave, how you're supposed to think, what reality is. And it fails because half the time, or I don't know, I don't have an exact percentage. I'm just using that as a reference point. It fails because it fails necessarily to to definitely get to a correct answer. Okay, some of the things that they call intuitive stereotypes, educated guess, rule of thumb, profiling, common sense. So this way of knowing, this way of understanding can fail, it can be incorrect, and it can be unjust. And a true scholar might use heuristics, but they will do so combined with a knowledge base and a paradigm that is tried and true. So this shortcut only works if you've got a really good foundational base, and um, it's not necessarily true. Okay, and so it's important to know how you know what you know to know whether what you know is true or false. And sometimes it's not either or, black and white. Sometimes there's a gray area. It's a little bit of this and a little bit of that. It's partially correct. It's not fully correct. So how do we, as people, make the world a better place? How do we improve life for ourselves and others? How do we make it more pleasurable? How do we know what we know? Do we really know what we know? Those are some of the questions. Now, so there's this study of logic and how certain types of logic will fail. And so you have to understand what your mindset is. How do you know what you know? Are you being influenced by advertisers that are not telling the complete truth? What do advertisers do to get you to buy a product? Do they sometimes get someone as an authority that's not really an authority to tell you about something? Like, let's say you go to eat a bowl of cereal and it's Wheaties, and you have an athlete on there that won marathons. And the athlete gets on there. I can think of one guy. He was married to the Kardashian. What was his name? And he here, let's take a look. So Wheaties takes athletes and puts them on their box. Breakfast of champions. Buy this and you'll win with this. This is going to make you strong. So they're using, how do you know what you know? Do you know that Wheaties are going to make you win the race? Is that faulty logic? Could you win the race by practicing and eating right and getting enough rest? and also having a body that has the right, you inherited the right stuff. Not everybody has the same bone structure and muscle mass. You can be born with an area of your body that has more muscle on it, and no matter how much you work out, you can't develop it anymore because that's the way you were born. I, for example, was born with a round rear end, and my half sister had a flat rear end, and she wanted a round rear end. And it's like, short of getting an implant, you're never going to get what I have. And, that's kind of a bad example, but people are born, they inherit certain things. But then, how do you know what you know? So the logic of this is, if you eat Wheaties, you're going to be a champion. Okay? Do you get that layperson faulty logic? So when you're going to go, you've got to be able to discern, is this advertising? What do they know about nutrition? Do they have a nutritionist? Are they a registered dietitian? No, they're an athlete. They follow advice of experts, and a product has come up to them and asked them to endorse the product. And in endorsing the product, they're going to sell their name on the product, and then they're going to get lots of money for that, for a certain time in their contract. Okay? So that's, and what about propaganda? That's a little bit more persuasive, but they use this logic that's going to tell you you're on the right side. They'll use different things to make you believe a perception that they want to sell. And it's a type of marketing and advertising as well. So when you do research, you're looking for the truth. And of course, this is based on faulty logic that might versus right. In other words, you don't have a right unless you're a big bully. And it's actually treat them rough, join the tanks. You buy a Liberty bond. They're trying to get people to reinvest in America by buying bonds to help support the war effort. That was an American propaganda. And then destroy this mad brute and list. So how do we know what we know is true? Do we just accept this? Is this true? Are we required to help uphold our country and get out there and, is the sun going to rise better now that we have this guy in office? Is life going to be cheery? What do you believe? How do you know what you know? How do you know what you know? So we have tradition, we have culture, we have reference group theory. This is another term that is used in sociological studies. And it's the reference. Who's your reference point? Are you part of a tribe? So you go and follow what the people in your reference group say. Like, let's say, let's just reference group theory, excuse me. I'm on sleep deprivation. Okay, so here it is. And this is used in marketing too. They see people in marketing and advertising and propaganda study psychology. They study customs and traditions. They do psychographics, which are profiles on people. And then they manipulate your mind to get you to follow what they want, speaking to your reference group. Now I'm going to quickly talk about something that is not, that you don't need to know if you're going to do research, and this is for scholarly research and practicing. But I want to tell you this because I have an internet marketing background, and I've taken master's classes in that. So it's called Psychographics. And most people don't know about this unless they've studied it. But marketers gather data on you through the internet. They track you, they follow you, they do what they can. The internet has not quite, the laws in the internet for privacy have not quite caught up. But they actually do psychological research on each individual to retarget ads to them. And they do this with politics too. And they try to influence you. And how do you discern whether or not you're targeted with this marketing and propaganda? So they have different psychographics to understand the market. And I'm not going to go into detail on that, okay, because it's kind of a little bit related, but it's a subset of mindset. But laypersons get targeted through a method, a marketing method called psychographics. It's a psychology branch that is used in marketing and propaganda. So this tradition that you grow up with, and then these scientific methods of playing on your heartstrings, and how you know what you know may be based on where you're raised and what influences are in your life, what traditional influences, right? So, you could be practicing Easter and Christianity, or you could be practicing the Festival of Lights, the miracle of the oil lamps, Maccabees, whatever. So, does this make it true? Does this make it right, what you learned? Is this the truth? Is this how you know what you know? Your faith, your custom, your culture? Or is this sort of a heuristic or social? Well, I know there was a St. Nicholas. We're just playing a little pretend game. There really was a St. Nicholas. And he loved children. He brought them toys. And we celebrate this every year. It's become commercialized in the United States and some of the European nations. Is the truth materialism? Is the truth Guy Fawkes Day? You got to be rebellious and skeptical. Seek refinement. What is the truth? So I guess, there's lots of holidays coming up and whatnot. How do you know what you know? How do you know the Spring Festival and this feng shui and these superstitions are real? The heck is this? This is a New Year's tradition where, oh my God, they kill bears and put on bear outfits? Ugh. Sorry, no offense to anybody. But anyway, how do you know what you know? Does your mother teach you how to bake? You have some sweet apple pie? They'll make you strong and fortify you? Or maybe you should seldom make that. Maybe you should watch your weight. So what do you know? How do you know what you know? Is this dangerous? The Swiss St. Lucia Day? Putting these candles on your head? So what other traditions do people have that might not be the truth? What kind of beliefs, Man, I'm sorry, guys. I think I'm talking too much. could hit a pause button when I'm live streaming, but I'm going to take a, a swig of kombucha. Hang on a second, guys. I really apologize. I got to catch my voice. So I'm going through the foundations of research, and I'm first saying what good research is not. There is value in tradition, customs, and whatnot. It gives a sense of cohesion, and we're not talking about that. We're talking about getting at the truth. Okay, we're not talking about fun or reference groups or what you do as a hobby or pastime or how you build a sense of community. We're talking about how you do scientific research and how you achieve the goal of making the world a better place and work as a scholar practitioner. And the two can coexist. You can have customs and cultures, and it can coexist with solid research, just as long as you can discern the difference between the truth and the customs and the traditions. And so let's take a look. Okay, so you've got a reference group, and these theories, these reference points may have truths in them. They may have untruths. The foundation of solid research includes elements that are basic, and they're based on philosophical foundations. And the two foundations that you're going to need to know about, if you're going to explain, when you do like a dissertation or a master's thesis, you might want to be able to answer the questions of what your ontological or your paradigm is, okay? So the two buzzwords are ontology and epistemology. And they're not just buzzwords because you really need to know them, especially if you're going to be in if you're going to be in any kind of solid research. You have to know these philosophical concepts, and particularly with psychology. Psychology is somewhat founded on philosophy, and so is sociology. So if you get into the PhD level or the master's, I don't know so much the master's level, you're going to need to have an idea of this philosophical foundation of how you know what you know. You have to do explaining, you have to show your work, you have to show it's reproducible, and you want to get at the truth. So ontology is considered um, a way of understanding. Well, no, wait. How do I explain this? It's the nature of reality. Okay? So let me just jump over here for a second. Okay, I see what I did. Okay, well, I'm looking at my notes and I start going into what the scholar practitioner is. And then if you scroll down past there, look at the philosophical foundations as the part of the outline, and I'll jump back over to what a scholar practitioner is afterwards. So I'm going to jump into ontology and epistemology. Now, these two theories combine, and whenever you're doing okay, here, what is ontology? Why do I want to know it? This ontology is used to show reality, to be realistic. And you don't necessarily you want to show what you're studying. Uh, are you using it for the science of business? You know, good business practices. What are you using it for? So at the higher levels of understanding, you're going to know um, what is, see, they use this in communications PhD, they use this in marketing PhDs, all kinds of different, even legal me- LLMs probably use this. It's very foundational. And so, even look, they have it in engineering. So, let's go look at the description for the general description. They call it a branch of metaphysics, dealing with the nature of being, a set of concepts and categories in a subject area or domain that shows their properties and relations between them. Okay, it comes from the Greek. Um, so it's a branch of philosophical study, but it's also part of logic in what premise or what kind of framework or paradigm you are using when you're conducting your research, or you're explaining your research, or you're explaining how you know what you know. So let's say you want to explain the magnetic field. You, there really is a magnetic field, but you can't see it with your naked eye, can you? You might need some special tools, or uh, you can't visualize evaporation unless you're in a desert and there's a small amount of, you know, it's very hard to. How do you know that the table's not real? What is reality? Is there a parallel universe? It's physics. So you've got to start out um, with an ontological uh, philosophical premise or framework for studying. What is reality? So you're going to say the reality is um, we have these people, we'll give it a name, we'll give something a name. We have these people that uh, have muscle issues, and they can't seem to move their muscles. Is it muscular dystrophy? We want to study how that happens. And so we're going to do a scientific study, and, you know, types of forms. So we're going to use um, research. Let's just see if they. Um, so anyway, when you're doing your research paradigm, you have things about how you perceive what is real, what's in the world, observations. You list the observations, you name them, and you explain them. You show your work. So the other method is the epistemological method. Wait a minute. Let's take a look at this. I'm just kind of like, okay, so here we have, I haven't looked at this until now. I did some readings, and I haven't even slept on this. I took philosophy like, I want to say 8 years ago. So, and then I've recently reviewed some of these topics. So here it says, what is a research paradigm? Ontology, what is reality? Epistemology, how do you know something? And methodology, how do you go about finding it? Now, I'm telling you that this particular, actually, this looks pretty good. I think I'm going to put it below so you can go look at it, because basically Now, I did in a nutshell say that you have a paradigm and you have to know the ontology and epistemology, but there's a whole bunch of different perspectives and methods. And this actually is a nice table that this is a really good thing that I just stumbled on. I'm going to add this to the list. Okay. So this is it. How do we know? I put the notes below and the talking points, but I want to know how I know. I want to show my work, right? And so you're going to ask yourself questions, is reality for humans different than the way the world really is? Is the lens with which we're looking at the world the correct lens? I'm adding this right now into the references, and I'll add it at the end of the after the video, goes through. So going through my notes, let's see. So we talked about the ontology and the nature of reality, and I just found this great page by Salma Patel, and I'm gonna put that below, and I'm gonna move on to Demystifying Ontology and Epistemology Research Methods, ResearchGate. I would have to download that. I just want to make sure. Okay, so study.com has a quiz to ask yourself this. So there's a lot of things that you can do to try to figure out exactly what it means. But this is the basic premise here. So we're going through ontology, epistemology. I touched briefly on these other things, but this is how we know. What is out there, ontology? What's reality? And how can we know what we know? And then this is how we know. So here's a nice graphic. Well, this is taking too long to load. I think I'm going to skip it. So sometimes you just have to go over things a lot and kind of let it marinate and sink in, and then go back over it again, hear it a couple different ways, and then it kind of clicks, But now, talking about epistemology, it's a philosophical study of knowledge, of how we know what we know. It's what is your frame of reference, and there's different ways of being using the epistemology. There's being in the world and of the world, or being outside of the world and not in the world. And why am I using that? Well, so there's two perspectives in epistemology that I can name off the top of my head. Is objective, and this is the philosophical angle of being objective, and or subjective, and for it to be objective, one would say, well, you can't immerse yourself in the world. You're not going to be objective. You can't go to war and be in the middle of the war to be objective about what's going on with the war. You have to get yourself out of the war, and you have to observe as an outsider to be objective. You have to do it from a distance. And the other way is like, no, to really understand war, you have to be immersed in that war or world, and you have to feel the war and learn from your experience, and then you can fully understand the war. And they have this book called The Art of War by and this is a method of using your enemy's own stuff against them, and really doing a it's a method and a way of reasoning, um, and it's how did Sun Tzu learn about the art of war? Did he learn it from actually engaging in war? Or did he do it from what are his methods? He talks about laying plans, observe, prepare, act. It should be thoroughly studied. You should do a simulation game. Waging war. So, do we accept this? Or do we look at the logic behind it? Do we recognize that there's some objectivity here and that there is an ontological and epistemological? How does he know this? How does he know about tactical dispositions, strengths and weakness, use of force, strategic attacks, maneuvering, battlegrounds? How does he know all this? How does he know what he knows? How do you know what you know? What are your paradigms? What is your mindset? Are you being objective? And when you're doing a study, you need to put down what your ontological and epistemological positions are, how you're studying it. You're going to have to show your work because a true scholar practitioner is going to know and be aware of what they're doing and how they're doing it and what way they're learning. Are they learning through experience? They're going to put that down. So what is the praxis and what's the research design? Now there's different methods of research and different ways of knowing besides just those theories. But I'm going to back up. Oh my gosh. Hang on again. I apologize. I just need to take a couple of guys, I am so sorry. Can tell why I'm not out running around and I'm hitting the books. So actually, when you're doing this, you probably want to look at it empirically as well. But so a scholar practitioner is going to look at things. So a scholar is going to I put down actual notes below on what a scholar is and what a practitioner is. And so a practitioner is going to seek to change the world and improve it. A scholar is going to seek the truth. They're both going to constantly refine what they've learned, review it, test it for validity. Is the experiment or the research reproducible? And continually refine and learn and build upon the knowledge. So that's kind of blurry. So if you want to be a scholar and a practitioner, or even if you just want to continue to be a layperson, you might want to know and ask yourself and be somewhat of a skeptic and ask, how do they know what they know? How did they arrive at that conclusion? Is it based on tradition? Oh, well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, what about the research? Is the research biased? Is it skewed? Is it based on faulty logic? Is it based on a small sampling? Is it propaganda? Is it advertising? Is it the truth? And basically, that's the goal. The goal is to find the truth and to seek to improve the world, to make the world a better place. So if you're going to be a scholar, that's what you want to do. But even if you're not going to be a scholar, you're going to want to know how to discern. And discernment alone does not involve just uh, intuition. You don't learn everything through osmosis. You have to sit down and study. You can trust another scholar, a professional, but all professionals, most of them, it's very difficult to get to a point where you're not influenced somewhat by your culture, by your tradition, by your practices of your culture. So sometimes um, it's hard to be objective. And I'm going to leave you with this now. And I want to thank you so much for stopping by. There are notes below. And until next time, there goes my phone again. All right. I want to thank you for stopping by. And I love to hear your comments. And if you want to add something that's great, or clarify something that I didn't make clear, or ask a question. So I want to thank you so much. Please put your comments below. And um, I want you to have a wonderful day. And if you're studying, I'm going to start making a playlist on research methods. And I already did something on APA, formatting and stuff like that. So um, as as you go through your journey, I hope you do well. And you cannot fail using this method. You cannot fail when you're researching, because even in your failure, you're learning something. You don't have to prove anything. You're just looking for the truth. So if you fail, if the logic doesn't fail, the method doesn't fail. The theory, the premise might fail. You might disprove something, but in disproving it, it's not really a failure. It's a success because you just learned for sure uh, through a repeatable experiment that this really does happen. And thank you again. So take care, everybody, and have a wonderful rest of your day. I just need to find the goodbye button. Until tomorrow, or until the next time, thank you again.